Good evening and welcome to the show. The topic tonight is On the Run, a story of a pursuit by the FBI of 5 young men for approximately 18 years. And tonight we have with us the author of On the Run, Mr. ABrowning. And let me welcome you to the show, Mr. Browning.
Thank you, Dr. Haney. It's good being here.
Mr. Browning, I think that On the Run is developing into one of the more controversial pieces of literature that we have dealing with the civil rights movement of the 1960s. And as the author of that book, I would like for you to start us off by giving us some information in reference to what the book is all about and how you came to write the book.
Well, Dr. Haney, the book is about a murder case that was set in Nashville concerning the shooting death of 2 police officers. The apprehension eventually, after almost 19 years, of 5 men, all of whom were black. It is about, more than anything else, a drummed up, trumped up case, an orchestrated case put together by the Nashville Metro Police Department and the Davidson County District Attorney's Office. Then, of course, you've got the drama of the 18-year flight and the chase by the FBI. Very controversial. I think it'll be revealing to a lot of people that what has been reported for all of these years, 18 years, was not at all what happened in 1968. There is a civil rights element to the book, obviously. It's a story about, now it has progressed to a story about 2 men who are in the Tennessee State Penitentiary, whom I absolutely don't think should be there.
Well, now, why don't you give us the overview of the book? I mean, how did these 2 policemen, how were they killed? And how are these young men, were these young men charged with this, with these murders?
Okay, to set the stage without going into great detail, there were 4 of the young men were from Cincinnati, Ohio. They were Charles Lee Heron, John Alexander, Ralph Kennedy, and Steve Parker. And the other one was William Allen from Old Hickory, Tennessee. All of them were either college graduates or college students, well educated. They were in Nashville, in North Nashville, in January of 1968 and were preparing to leave for a return trip to Cincinnati. As they left in a 1967 Plymouth from Hermosa Street, an apartment on Hermosa Street, they got over to 16th Street, 16th Avenue North, and were stopped by a police officer and were told to drive down an alley, which is a dead-end street, 16th Avenue North, which has quite a history in relations with police and blacks from the 1960s. What went on, some kind of rough justice, I should say, down in that alley. They were asked to go down that alley. They went down that alley. Another police car came in. A shootout ensued. The police officer shooting first, which has never been reported until this book. That was all covered up by the police department. One of the blacks, Bill Allen, by his own admittance, retaliating to that gunfire, killing 1 police officer at the scene, leaving another wounded. The 5 men left, 2 going one way down the railroad tracks, 3 going another way, and that started the longest running manhunt in the history by the FBI.
Okay, so you've got 2 policemen who are now killed by 2 of the youngsters. 3 are not present when the killings occur.
Oh, absolutely.
And so now what about the initial apprehension? How did the community react to this?
Well, the community was turned upside down, frankly, that night. It was a very emotional thing because 2 police officers were shot. Police officers came in that night in pickup trucks from off-duty. They rampaged through North Nashville. A lot of those cases are documented in this book, blatant cases of police brutality.
Okay, so the police is now searching the community, looking for the 5 persons that they believe responsible for the death of the 2 police officers. Now, where were they at this time?
Well, actually, Ralph Kennedy and Bill Allen were still in the area of the campus. They were staying in an apartment that night. Steve Parker, Charles Lee Heron, and John Alexander were well on their way to Cincinnati by the time all this happened, by riding with a friend from Chicago. The next morning, Bill Allen and Ralph Kennedy got a ride to Louisville, and then embarked to toward New York together. Ralph Kennedy got off and decided he was going to go home, and Bill Allen went on to New York, and in essence what we had was the rest of them being in Ohio and Illinois.
So eventually they would turn themselves in different places and be brought back to Nashville for trial.
Well, right. 4 days after the shooting incident, Steve Parker and Ralph Kennedy turned themselves in the Cincinnati Police Department saying, we were wanted in Tennessee, we had nothing to do with the shooting of those police officers, and they were brought back to Tennessee shortly thereafter. 2 months later, Bill Allen was arrested in New York by the FBI. He was on their FBI's most wanted list and was brought back to Tennessee. John Alexander was arrested 3 years later. Charles Lee Heron was arrested 16 years later. In November of 1968, Bill Allen, Ralph Kennedy, and Steve Parker were tried in front of an all-white jury here in Nashville on first-degree murder charges in the shooting death of the white police officer who died 61 days after a black police officer. They were tried and convicted by an all-white jury, sentenced to 99 years in the state penitentiary. To show you how different the sentencing worked out in this case, John Alexander was apprehended 3 years later in St. Louis, was allowed to plead guilty to manslaughter, served about 2 years. Charles Lee Heron was on the FBI's most wanted list for 18 years, was arrested in Jacksonville, Florida in 1986, was brought back to Nashville, pled guilty to voluntary manslaughter, 2 years, with a little more for interstate flight. Meanwhile, in 1974, to add a little drama to this, Steve Parker, Ralph Kennedy, and Bill Allen escaped from the Tennessee State Penitentiary.
And this is the primary focus of your study from that point on, the activities of the 3 persons involved in that escape and their eventual apprehension.
Well, that's exactly right, Dr. Haney. We started out, that was going to be the total focus in the book, being chased by the FBI. As I got into it and saw how ridiculous this whole court case was in Nashville in 1968, and this whole case that was advanced by the prosecution, then it changed.
Well, now, how did you find the civil rights situation fitting into your case in the 1960s?
Well, it was very much a civil rights case simply because of the emotions that were going on at that time, and the newspapers contributed to that by the headlines the day after the shooting incident: black militants gunned down 2 police officers or whatever of the sorts. You know, that was the public perception. North Nashville, at that time we had policemen from Nashville making speeches in front of the House committees on racial issues and you know, saying that people here were communists.
And so the newspaper opinion and the public atmosphere simply inflamed public opinion in terms of them receiving a fair trial.
And not only that, contributed to the whole tragedy that existed that night, because there would have never been a shooting incident had there not been such emotions and mistrust between the races in the 1960s.
And so Mr. Allen and Mr. Parker are now incarcerated in the Tennessee State Penitentiary, are they not?
Sadly,
okay,
by my account.
What we'll try to do during this 3rd segment is to talk to the president of the Nashville Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the NAACP, and he'll give us some information in reference to what they're doing, not only in terms of this case, but nationally in terms of trying to rectify this wrong that you've identified. And we'll be back with you following this commercial break.